Today, arcades as we know it are almost gone. The glowing machines, once found in basically every mall and bowling alley, have mostly disappeared also. But in the late 1970s, these machines were instrumental in creating something the world had never seen before. They started the video game culture. Video gaming started as a very social phenomenon because people didn't play games at home alone, because it was a time before consoles and home computers. So the first gamers had to gather around cabinets in arcades, watching, waiting, hoping their name would stay at the top of the high score list. These shared experiences of competition and collaboration were the early roots of gaming as we know it. But just as quickly as arcades appeared and dominated entertainment, they started to fade. Arcades as a concept basically vanished from the world, but the culture that they helped start ironically found even more places to grow. So how did simple coin-operated machines kickstart a form of art and entertainment that's now larger than the entire movie industry? And why did arcades, these places that once defined gaming, almost disappear? To answer that, we have to go back to where it all started. Long before the internet, before any consoles, back to a time when gaming happened in public, one coin at a time. The late 70s was a period of great cultural and technological change. Great tension called for even greater distractions and entertainment. People had set their eyes onto the future like never before, and the future, it looked back. With breakthroughs in manufacturing and technology, most parts of everyday life were improving, and entertainment was no exception. See, arcades as a concept existed before video games. Public spaces like bars and amusement halls did have mechanical machines designed to do one thing: take your coin. Pinball machines, shooting galleries, and other electromechanical games had existed for decades at that point and were quite popular. So this human desire for fellowship and competition wasn't started by technology, it was just enabled by it. And then one company supercharged it. 1972, Atari. A black and white screen, 2 paddles, 1 ball. Pong.
Jerry, video games are the latest craze to sweep the country. Millions of people are addicted to hours of gazing at electronic images.
It didn't rely on springs and sprockets, it was digital, and even if Pong wasn't the most complex thing ever built, it still proved something massive. People would pay to play a video game if it's fun, and they would wait in line to do it. This wind of change turned into a hurricane a few years later. 1978, Japan. Space Invaders. Space Invaders' success was in its simplicity. Rows of alien ships slowly marching across the screen, moving a little closer to Earth, and between Earth and them, the player controlling the cannon at the bottom of the screen. 1 joystick, 1 button, a space-themed screen to tie it all together, and since it drew from sci-fi tropes, it was quite intuitive for new players. But what made Space Invaders both easy to pick up and difficult to master was hidden in its rhythm. At the start, the aliens move slowly, but every time you destroy one, the game speeds up. What begins as a slow, hypnotic dance turns into a frantic race against time. The gameplay kept accelerating, so you couldn't develop muscle memory, meaning that the player must always be engaged and locked in. And because you can't truly beat the game, the only thing that mattered was your score. Each coin meant 1 more chance to beat the person who was ahead of you in the scoreboard. So for the first time, a video game wasn't just something you played, it was something you competed in. The early 1980s were the golden age for arcades. New games would appear almost every month. Asteroids, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga. And as the popularity and demand for games increased, arcade machines began appearing everywhere. Shopping malls, cinemas, pizza restaurants. And the experiences were getting even more refined. Games like Donkey Kong started to introduce something new. Characters, stories, a small figure called Jumpman, who would later become known by a different name, Mario.
Here we go!
Pac-Man, an icon of the era, played completely differently but just as captivating. And then there were games that didn't look like games at all. In Dragon's Lair, for example, players took part in what felt like TV show quality animation, blurring the lines of what games were expected to look like. Some machines were built to feel bigger and more compelling to spend your coin on. In Star Wars Arcade, you didn't just play, you sat in a cockpit. Others, like Outrun, gave you a steering wheel and pedals, and a feeling of speed. Before trends and tastes matured, no concept was off the table. Every game was competing with one another, so developers were motivated to not play it safe and to create truly different experiences. Even though getting into game development wasn't as easy as it is today, at peak years, the number of companies building them would easily double annually. This variety and novelty of the Golden Age is one of the main reasons why so many people became players, or gamers. And the target audience wasn't a monolith, there were different games for different people. Arcades themselves were a so-called third place, not home or not work or school. It was a space for different people to mix, form friendships or rivalries. And with time, arcades developed their own etiquette. For example, this King of the Hill playstyle, especially like in fighting games where the winner stays on and the defeated one lets the next person play.
The pressure may get to him. One of those random elements might happen. Sounds like he just cleared another board, but we could have a wild barrel or some aggressive fireballs. I thought I was going to be the first fun spot kill screen.
If you wanted to play next, you didn't shout or argue, you simply placed a coin on the edge of the machine. Everyone in the arcade understood what that meant. You were next. The next attempt, the next challenge, and maybe, if you're good enough, the next high score.
A normal person would want to beat the machine.
High scores weren't just numbers, they were reputations. If your name stayed at the top of the machine, everyone in the arcade knew who you were.
I often have people ask me what my handle is, what my three initials are.
USA?
USA.
However, the tide of the Golden Age started turning. By the mid-1980s, the arcade machines had competition. Proper, high-tech competition.
The Sega Master System.
Nintendo Entertainment System.
Atari 2600 is priced incredibly low.
That's what I want.
Until then, the games you could play at home were monochromatic, simple, and expensive. Arcade machines had more power than any home console, so the graphics and sounds were just so much more impressive. They were worth the trip down to your local gaming spot. But home consoles were catching up, and as their tech advanced, so did their market share. Atari alone sold over 5 million units at their peak, and players were sending a clear signal. They expected entertainment everywhere, including their homes. Throughout the 1990s, the tidal wave of arcades was receding faster and faster. Once seen as the future of entertainment, they were now yesterday's news. The demand for gaming drove the hardware development, making it smaller, cheaper, and more accessible. So ironically, the machines that once gave birth and defined the gaming culture were now being replaced by something else. Home gaming, personal, portable gaming, and later, online gaming. Arcades walked so consoles could run. They were basically gaming greenhouses that sprouted demand, preferences, genres, and styles, influence of which we still see today. The competitive high score chasing is now known as esports.
Back gives him the Jimmy jab, and that is a huge round for Mouse.
Gaming with an audience over your shoulder, now you're talking about streaming, and friction and rivalries move to multiplayer voice chat. But the arcades never completely died. Places like Spilmuseet in Denmark still keep the flame alive with one of the largest collections in the world. It's a football field-sized arcade machine time capsule with more than 20,000 games. And these machines are still running, decades after most arcades in the world had disappeared. Not because they're practical, not because they're profitable, but because they are part of our culture and they're worth preserving. Each cabinet here carries a small piece of gaming history. The glowing CRT screens, the worn joysticks, the coin slots polished by thousands of hands. By today's standards, they're rough around the edges and quirky, sometimes even not by choice, like the famous Pac-Man level 256 bug, where due to the way 8-bit number memory was stored, it would cause an overflow and make the game unplayable. But just like the imperfections of a vinyl record, these quirks have their charm, and people try to recapture that even today. Arcades were loud and unpredictable. Strangers watched each other play. Players learned by observing the person before them, and sometimes a high score could make a person famous, even if only in that room. And while most arcades eventually faded away, places like Spelmuseet keep that real-life gaming community spirit alive. Not just out of nostalgia, but to serve as a living reminder of where gaming culture began. Because long before online multiplayer, before streaming, esports, or global leaderboards, gaming happened face-to-face, in front of a cabinet, with a coin.